installing the rear adjustable BMR sway bars and end links on my 2021 Camaro ZL1. Welcome everyone to the Derpzilla channel, and for today, part 7 of my super long-running BMR suspension upgrade video series for my 2021 Camaro ZL1 here, which is still sitting on my quick jack lift, and it's been here for much longer than originally anticipated. But for today, I'm doing the first part of the 2-part sway bar and end links install. This is for the rear adjustable sway bar and the rear end links, of course, both from BMR. Everything sitting right here is what you would get if you would order the rear sway bar, rear end links, which then come with some hardware here, and the rear sway bars come with these bushings. Now, this BMR rear sway bar is a beefy piece. It's 1 1/4 inch thickness. It is hollow, and the OEM one, I believe, is a slightly over 1 inch and solid, but this one actually, from what I've seen and heard, I don't know yet for sure, but this one does way more. It's stiffer, and it will actually adjust your you're able to actually fine tune. Since this is the adjustable version, they do have a non-adjustable version, but this one has 3 adjustment points. And based on your adjustment, you can control your understeer, oversteer, and of course the whole piece itself will help you control your body roll. Now I would suggest most likely you're gonna want to install these in a pair. I do have the front sway bar here and front end links back here with my workbench of random stuff. Now with this rear sway bar install that we're doing today and rear end links, I'm actually going to be also installing these spherical end link boots right here. These do not come with end links. You have to order those separate. I'll have a link in the description for this with part number information, and I'll show you how to install this boot. If you saw my, I believe with my tow rod video, I had something similar with larger boots right here for that. It's the same process. You just have to pretty much grease it up, slip this boot on here. Should give us a little bit more longevity with your joint here, and let this thing survive a little bit longer in various elements. Now we'll go ahead and take a quick look of what we're going to need for this install. We're going to get the old OEM parts off and the new one right here. Get this all installed. A closer look at the BMR rear adjustable sway bar. Now, as mentioned, they do offer a non-adjustable variation, and they do offer in 2 different colors. You have the red, which is what I've been mostly consistently using for all of my BMR suspension parts, but they also offer it in this black hammer tone, which I actually went with for my end links just to kind of break up the sea of red, even though it looks beautiful. Now, when you order the rear sway bar, you do get these polyurethane bushings. These are greasable bushings right here, so you can top off any of your grease your fittings when you grease your suspension bits. And your end links also have a greasable fitting right here. So I went with Super Lube, as I have gone with this entire install. So I'm going to stay consistent with the Super Lube, which is what they recommend. When you order your end links, you do get a bag of hardware, as seen here. And with the sway bar, you actually just get the bushings and the sway bar. You have no extra additional hardware. We're going to be reusing the bolts on the car holding the OEM bushings and sway bar in place. So don't worry about that. Now, another thing to note, when I did receive my rear sway bar with all my suspension parts, they kind of sat on my workbench for a few years before I even got around to this project. I had some, I don't know if it was shipping damage or just from storing these components for a long period of time, and I actually had some damage to the sway bar, just paint chips and stuff like that. It is powder coated, and I had pieces of powder coat like chipped off in a number of different areas, and so I have a little bit of discoloration in a few spots because I have actually gone and touched it up. You don't want to install any of your suspension parts if you have exposed metal, maybe an avenue for rust or anything like that. You don't want your parts to rust on your car. So I actually can show you guys a picture right here, and that is just some of the damage. Probably, who knows if it was shipping or whatnot. It was so far past, I didn't even bother with contacting BMR. But I picked up this paint right here, and actually it seemed like it matched very well. And for the final look, right, I can't even see where, oh, over here, and very hard to see it. You can kind of see where I kind of over sanded it, but I wet sanded everything and filled it with paint, painted it up, wet sanded, polished it. It turned out pretty good. You know, it's not a professional look, but it's gonna be underneath the car, and one of the actually bushings is gonna be, I believe, sitting over some of it. So I just wanted no bare metal to be exposed, and that's pretty much what I accomplished with this. So I actually spent a few weeks just messing with waiting to order paint and everything like that. That delayed me from my previous video, but that's no excuse. Anyways, we're gonna go ahead and lay out all of the components we're gonna need to get this OEM one uninstalled and get this one installed. A decent selection of tools that we're gonna need for this install, because we are doing the sway bar and end links, which I would recommend doing because you know, they're all connected. If you just replace end links, you're gonna be unconnecting most of the sway bar anyways. So I'm just, like everything, I just like doing everything together when you can. So for the sway bar and end links, you have a nice list of parts here. So we'll go ahead and take a look. Of course, to get the wheel off, if your wheel is not already off your car, you're gonna want something like this bad boy, 22mm socket. I have these no marring socket, which has a sleeve, so you don't bang up your wheel when getting those lug nuts off. You want a 17mm, 15mm, and 14mm wrench. You're going to want I believe it's a 5mm and a 5/16 5mm hex key. That's going to be for the end links, which have these wonky little setup there you have to deal with. You're going to want your 9/16 socket. You're going to want a 15mm and a 10mm socket. A couple ratchets, of course. And then you're going to want a grease gun. I have this Hercules grease gun, which I'm still getting kind of a little bit better with, but even a traditional normal grease gun, I have one sitting back here, will work fine with some super lube grease. And of course, you're going to wait a method to get your car up in the air. I have it on the quick jack, and you're going to want a jack of some sort if you don't have a quick jack, or some jack stands. And even if you do have it jacked up, you want to have a jack so you can actually apply some, you load up your suspension when you do your torque values and everything like that, or when you have everything tightened up. You want to tighten it up with a load on your suspension. And for that, what we do is we put the jack with a rubber block or something so you don't mar up your rotor. But underneath the rotor, we lift up the rear suspension until it just starts coming up off the quick jack, and that tells me all the weight's on the suspension. We can go ahead and torque everything down, tighten everything up, and at that point, then we know that it's going to be the best case scenario, short of tightening everything up with the car with the wheels on the ground, which accessing most of the stuff is super hard to do that, or impossible. So that's my method right there. Seems like it works. We'll find out. Over at the rear of the car, just for a quick cursory look at the OEM setup for your end link, which is rear end link is right here. Rear sway bar, of course, is right here. And notice it's also non-adjustable and pretty much bolts in a single place. And then it bolts down here. You can see that. And then, of course, the sway bar kind of goes up and underneath the car and is bolted in place right here with two bolts holding the bushing, and the bushing, I guess you could say clamp or whatever. Now, there's one on this side, one on the other side, and then we should be able to then kind of maneuver this carefully, this sway bar, once we unbolt everything out from underneath the car. I do have an aftermarket exhaust, which doesn't have the huge lunch box. Should make it a little easier to get out. If you have a lunch box, it might be more of a pain. You should be able to get it out without removing it, but you may have to drop that. I guess it depends on how much you're able to kind of finagle that in and around. Now, so what I'm going to do first is I'm going to remove it from the sway bar from the end link here, and actually down here probably. I might just, we'll see how it is. I might just unbolt it from here and here. We'll have to take a look. I decided to start with the lower portion of the end link bolt, 15mm bolt here. I'm going to remove that. Now, you do have some clearance issues with the lower control arm here with this little cover. It looks like if you try to get a socket of some sort on there, there's no real room. So you might have to be stuck with a 15mm wrench. I have a ratcheting wrench. I'm going to go ahead and grab that, but you can see that fits on there. You should have clearance. I'll get my ratcheting wrench. We'll go ahead and back that out. Driver's side bolt is off. I'm gonna go ahead and remove the passenger side. We'll come back here, and then if you can see it, up, I have my light on it, but right up here is the mount, the bushing for the sway bar, and then we'll remove those. So I'm gonna go ahead and knock that one out on the other side, and we'll come back. Already removed the passenger side 10mm bolts for the sway bar mount and the 15mm bolt for the bottom portion of the end link to the car. I left the end link on the sway bar over there for now. I'll probably remove it after I remove this, but I'm gonna see if I can pull the sway bar out maybe with the end link still stuck to it. It might be too hard to do that, so I'll remove it, but we'll see. Anyways, it'd be helpful if you have one of these little electric ratchet little tools, because one of the bolts, this one looks like it has a wiring harness in the way. The other side, the passenger side, does not. So it's kind of hard to access the bolt, which is, of course, right behind where this harness is. So let's see how I can get to that. All right, I was able to pop the I guess the clip that's holding the wire harness in place. Pretty much I just pried it up and to the back, and that popped it off, I guess, the bolt. And then there's also a little clip kind of off camera up here that is also just, you pull it straight down and pops off the bolt. And then we'll see if we can actually get to the bolt now. All right, looks like this top bolt for this driver's side sway bar mount is slightly different than the other bolt. The bottom bolt here is actually has like a one of those wiring harness pegs coming off the top. So once you remove the wiring harness, make sure you have a deep socket, can fit around that and get down to the bolt, and we can get that removed. This is what I was talking about where the wiring harness clips to. So just keep in mind when you reinstall, this will be the upper bolt, driver's side for the rear sway bar up here. Don't put it somewhere else, or you won't have anywhere to put that wiring harness. Now for the bottom bolt. All right, sway bar is detached. We'll see if we can maneuver this out, but I think I'm gonna have to I'm gonna go ahead and just remove the upper bolt for the end links. This is the end link from the rear passenger side, which I went ahead and removed. I wanted to demonstrate real quick what you're gonna need to do with your 5mm hex key, which will actually go into this little, I guess, Allen key, I guess insert or whatever. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna wanna place that key in there to hold everything in place so you can actually remove the nut. And what I found to be easiest was I actually took a ratcheting wrench, put it on there like so, kind of balancing the camera here. Then I went ahead and placed here, and then I went ahead and broke it free and loosened it up. It did seem a little bit easier by partially just reinstalling the bottom bolt of the sway bar mounts on both sides, just to kind of hold it in place so you can more easily get some force on this and get this thing loosened up. You don't have to, but I figured we'll go ahead and remove these before we try to pull the sway bar out. Just less areas for this to bang into and get caught on trying to pull that sway bar out. Back at the driver's side, and to mention, we're gonna get you a wrench, 15mm wrench around the nut here, and then we wanted to get our 5mm key, Allen key in here. I'm trying to do this blindly so I'm not blocking the camera, but let's see if I can. All right, so I have the key in place and the wrench, and we want to see if I can get this thing broken free. Actually, let me. All right, now I'm gonna switch to my ratcheting wrench. And we have another end link. So now we can go ahead and remove those bottom sway bar mount bolts that I just kind of partially threaded, just a few threads in there just so I could get some leverage on this end link bolt. And technically you probably remove the top and bottom on the end links before you even unbolt the sway bar. I'm not sure why the instructions tell you to remove the mounts first, but hopefully if you watch this through before you start, you'll see that maybe removing the end links completely first is the way to go. So I'm gonna remove those 2 bolts the rest of the way and see if I can pull this. You're gonna have to kind of maneuver this sway bar around and out. Took those bottom sway bar mount bolts out completely, the last couple threads, and put down some microfibers here between my tow rod and the sway bar, just so I didn't want to have the sway bar swing down and bang into that, chip up that powder coating, and then I have to try to repair that like I did with the sway bar, which is just a pain, especially because it's already installed in the car. Yeah, so there we have it. I'm going to try to move it around and see if I can pull it past, make clearance, I guess pull it this way and swing it downwards without hitting tow rod, and then see if I can get her out. Yeah, we'll see. Progress so far, after like 10 minutes of messing with this thing, I was able to clear the tow rods and get the sway bar to swing down, and I kind of have it here. Just, you got to keep messing with it. You kind of have to try to push it to one side enough so you can swing down the arm, and then try to push the other side to swing down the arm. So I have it hanging down here. I have it pretty far out. I don't see how you can even remove these off the OEM bar. I'm not sure if these are welded on or what. That would give me some more clearance. But the issue now is I am running into the exhaust mount here. So this is clanking in there. It doesn't have enough distance out here to like pull it down and circle this up above it. So I'm not sure if I have to pop this exhaust mount off. Maybe then I can drop this down maybe just a little bit and then swing this around it and then get it the rest of the way. But still working on it, and we'll see if we get this thing out. Ended up popping off this rear exhaust hanger here, and then kind of just pulling the sway bar up and over this. I have the Borla Attack exhaust, and so if you have a lunchbox, it's going to be very hard, but you might need to remove one side of where you're going away from, and then it looks like I got some more clearance to back this sway bar out the passenger side. So we'll see. But so driver's side, pop this bushing off. I was able to get the thing up and over it, and that seemed like it gives me some more room to then move the sway bar to the passenger side from the driver's side. So I'm gonna keep working, and I'll give you a quick summary if any more complications I may run into. OEM rear sway bar, kind of a pain. I'll probably spend a good 15 minutes getting this thing off. I definitely would recommend the microfibers to protect your tow rods. I don't think I damaged anything getting them out, but hopefully my little problem areas that I pointed out help you guys get your sway bar off. I didn't see a lot of good video footage showing what you need to do, but yeah, pretty much once the end links came off, there's no way you can do this with the end links on, so definitely remove the end links completely. You're gonna need to, out of breath, but I went out the passenger side. It would be the opposite if you go out the driver's side, I guess, but I ended up removing the bushing off of the long exhaust mount from my exhaust on the driver's side. That let me then swing this down up above it, and then I was able to get more further inward. You just got to kind of just rotate her around. These things, I guess these don't come off. I don't know if they're welded on or whatever, but or maybe you can pry it off. I don't know. Maybe if there's a way to remove these, it would be easier. I'm not sure if you can remove it. Maybe they are, because this, of course, has more area to catch on stuff. So these were catching on things that are kind of sharp, jagged, can scratch stuff pretty easily if you're not careful. Of course, they're still on mine. If you can get these off and you don't need to reuse your thing, maybe there's a way to get these off. I'll try to pry on it. I'll see. I'll report back if I can. This thing is surprisingly pretty freaking heavy. It's a little over 1 inch. You can definitely see difference in thickness of the sway bars. So definitely a trial and patience, and be careful. Don't rip this out without paying attention. I did it solo as well. So I found by laying directly below the center of the car with my head forward, looking upward, I can put pressure in the middle of the sway bar, and then using both arms, kind of, that's what helped me just maneuver it out, remove that bushing for the exhaust, and then I was able to just keep working my way out, and I was able to get it out without damaging anything. I didn't see anything damaged. Using microfibers to protect your tow rod, you should be good to go. So I'll weigh these, see what the weight difference is. I'm actually wouldn't be surprised the OEM one's heavier. It feels, this is a solid bar, and this is hollow. It's just a wider diameter, but yeah. And I'll show you the graph of the adjustment differences and all that stuff on the screen after I do these weights. I have this old scale I got, I don't know how many years ago. It's relatively accurate. I wouldn't say perfect. It says it's zeroed out. I got a 1 kilogram weight here. It's not going to be, you know, crazy. 2 pounds, 2 ounces. Okay, that sounds 1 kilogram, about 2 pounds, 2 ounces. So it's just under a kilogram is what it's reading, so it's pretty close. So this should be good enough for at least this project for science. And kind of a pain. I'm going to try balancing this on there. I'm going to balance them the same way. So if they're off, it's going to be off in a similar manner. Okay, so it's kind of balanced, kind of goofy. Some of the weight's hanging off the sides, so you know, who knows how actually accurate this is. But it should be equal between them on accuracy. Now, this does have the mounts that I could not get off the sway bar, and we're reading 17 pounds, 6 ounces. So I'm gonna get this one laid on there, and I'm just gonna lay the mounts on there with it, and that should be roughly close. So let's move this big old clunker out of the way here. Jeez. All right. Try not to wreck my workbench. Couple mounts here. Just the mounts alone, 13 ounces. And the hollow BMR sway bar. Sorry, the camera work is not the best because I'm just trying to balance this myself here. Of course, the other sway bar is in the way. But BMR sway bar on the scale. This thing is just too slick. I can't just get it to balance by itself like the OEM one, so I'm going to kind of just barely hold it right before I take the reading. But we'll see. Just barely holding it, and we get about 13 pounds, 7 ounces. So quite a bit lighter than the OEM part. Let me get the scale out of here because this thing is like a damn slip and slide. After the weight disaster trying to weigh this super freaking slick BMR sway bar, I want to do a side-by-side comparison so you can see the bars next to each other a little bit more accurately. As you can see, BMR, 3 adjustment points. OEM, of course, non-adjustable. A little over 1 inch in diameter, solid bar, hollow, 1 1/4 inch. You got, I believe, rubber bushings, and I don't know if this is welded on mount, and you have a mount that's not welded on that is, I guess, free floating or whatever, but it'll be locked in place once the sway bar, because I believe it actually locks in right here once it's installed, and it'll butt up against this, I guess, this piece right here on the BMR bar. And geometry is relatively similar overall. I mean, of course, it has to fit in the same spot and with the same end links, because this does work with OEM end links as well as the BMR end links and other aftermarket end links. Now, yeah, so pretty much a rough comparison. I believe this OEM bar has, I don't know, 3-something years on it. Light driving, nothing crazy, so it's not super dirty or grimy or anything like that. Not, it's not a horrible sway bar. It's a pretty solid sway bar. Some cars nowadays, you don't even get freaking, front and rear sway bars. So can't complain. I just want to do the entire BMR setup. That's why I went with the sway bar. And gives me a little bit ability to dial in. Speaking of that, with the 3 adjustments, we can kind of dial in our understeer, oversteer. I'm going to look at the graph and kind of map out what setup I want. I haven't thought about it yet. I'm going to do a little, contemplation before I finish this and get this completed. And then we'll decide, what option will be best for you. And, if you're tracking the car, if you're doing some twisties, tail to drag, and all that fun stuff, may depend on, and you're driving, what kind of driving style you have. You might want to set your adjustment depending on your preference. So let's go ahead and get this ugly OEM bar out of the way, and then we will prep up our end links, match them up with the OEM end links. So I can show you guys those real quick. Here is the OEM end link, like so. End link comparison, significantly beefier with the BMRs. This thing is very, very tiny. I mean, still, it's good for 90% applications, but it's much smaller, much thinner. This thing is just, I don't see how you could break one of these. I mean, this thing is stout. Looks like a damn dumbbell or something. Of course, once you put the rubber boot, you'll have this for some extra protection. We'll cover that as well. And we wanted to actually, we'll be spinning this out and matching the overall length with the OEM one. And then we can get all this assembled, and I get to have fun putting the thicker BMR bar onto the car. Yeah, that'll be interesting. I'm still contemplating. They say to install this on here, the bushings onto the bar, and then feed it into the car. Maybe I'll try to feed the bar in first and then add these on. They're pretty simple. They just split right here. As you can see here, we grease it, and then it just snaps back into place. And you can see here's the grease fitting. It just adds grease. It doesn't add any more grease. I guess it will. It'll feed grease right into the thing and on the outside. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, it might be easier to feed the sway bar in before you add these. Add these once it's kind of centered underneath the car hanging. Snap these into place and then mount them up. I don't know with how much effort and how much these snagged on stuff. It might be an option. The instructions don't mention that, but you know, that's what I'm thinking. So we'll find out how it goes. I have the end links and sway bar and the hardware for the end links and the sway bar mounts here all laid out on my workbench in preparation for getting this installed onto the car. Now, a few things I wanted to cover because it's super vague in the instructions. When you get your hardware bag here for your end links, it comes with 6 washers. You have 2 of these bolts right here. You have 2 bolts like this for an Allen key. And then you also have 2 nuts and then 2 of these bearing insert pieces right here. And it's kind of confusing and not really covered very well on how you're going to lay out your end links once you install it on the car. So I kind of laid it out here to show you where all the components are going to go once you do install it in the car. Now this is the lower portion of the end link that's going to be installed into the knuckle. And it does note that you want, if you look here, you can kind of see, but there's a very narrow edge between here and the end link body, and then a much wider space right here. And this is very important when you install on the car. You cannot get these switched around. This wider portion right here is going to be what is going to be flush up against the knuckle. And then the narrower portion here is going to be further away from the knuckle, where the bolt is going to be going into the end link right here. And it doesn't really cover this, but you're going to have a washer here between the bolt head and the end link, and you're gonna have another washer here on the inside portion of the end link between the end link and your knuckle. It doesn't really point that out in the instructions that I saw, but I did look around in some forums and I did find that someone spoke with BMR and that's what they said to do with these 2 washers here. And then you're gonna have another washer. You're gonna be up here on the bolt, on the nut side, between the nut and your sway bar. So the sway bar will be right here where you mounted, you know, kind of like right here. It's going to be here, between here, and then your insert for your bearing is going to be right here, and you're going to want it to be laid out in this manner, going in from, I guess, the sway bar side through the end link, and then of course you have this bolt here will be going through this end. So there's no washer here, no washer here. You're just going to have one here, and one between the bolt, or the nut, sorry, and the sway bar. So that's kind of the layout of what you're going to be doing on how you install this on the car. And it's a little confusing because they don't really, they're not very, I guess, they don't make it very obvious. Now, since I am running this boot here, I still need to install a boot on this end link, which we'll do here shortly. I'll show you how to do that, super easy. Quick look at the sway bar adjustments. Now to note, the inner bolt hole in your sway bar, if you have the adjustable sway bar, this is going to be the actual stiffer setting. middle setting, and then this is the softer setting. Now even the softer setting, I'll put up a chart right here and on screen, hopefully this can be shown, but even with the rear bar, if you have the softest position, that's still 135% increase on your stiffness over the OEM bar. The middle one is 154%, and then the stiffest setting is 178%. And then also there's it take into consideration your front to rear bias. If you're also installing the BMR front sway bar, you're going to want to determine your settings front and rear of how you want your bias to be, if you want to be more front or rear. I plan on keeping it relatively close to OEM 0% bias, kind of like the OEM spec. So looking at this chart, it looks like if I run the stiffest position in the front with the middle position in the rear, that should give me a 2% front bias, which is very close to 0%, only a slight difference. And I'm thinking I'm going to run that initially to see how it feels, and then I'll adjust from there. Some people start with the softest and softest, some go middle. It just depends on your personal preference, what you plan on doing, tracking, all that stuff. I have heard that you can't run the softest position on the rear bar with the BMR end links, I guess because of the beefiness of them and how they may impact other things. So that's why I'm avoiding the soft initial position. And to get me closest to what I think is close to this 0% bias front to rear, kind of keeps it the most neutral feel, I'm going to run that stiffest in the front and the middle setting in the rear. So take a look at the chart, determine what your requirements are going to be, and then you can go from there. But just keep in mind, at least from what I heard, I'm not going to test it out, but I've read in a number of spots on the forums that I believe you can't run softest position in the rear with the BMR end links. Now, if you're keeping your OEM ones, that's probably not an issue. So next up, real quick, we're going to spin out the length of these end links to match the OEM ones. And as you can see here, pretty close out the door. But anyways, we have a jam nut here. Loosen this up, spin this out, and then I'll see if I can stick a bolt through both ends, have it travel through whatever to get it perfectly matched up. And then we can then tighten up the jam nut, 17mm, I believe, wrench to do so. And then we'll have these lengthen out to the correct position. You do want it to be even, centered. You don't want it to be, you don't want your bearing or this head of this bearing to be rotated and not flush, horizontally to match the OEM ones. If you've seen my tow rod install video, same process as installing the boot on the tow rod. We have different boots. I have the part number for these ones. They're much smaller, and when you install them, it's pretty much just going to slide over. Now, trick I found is to kind of go in maybe a little bit of an angle and then rotate it. I'm going to put some super lube grease around the bearing, and I'm going to use this fancy boot tool to help us with the install. And it's super simple. It just goes inside, expands out the boot, and then it goes on like so, all greased up, ready to go. And the boot is installed. It's that simple. Everything locked in pretty simply, no issues. With both end links sized properly, and quick final check. If you want to do a final check once the boot's on, make sure nothing came loose. You can just kind of lay it on like so, and then take one of your bolts, drop it in. It should be relatively centered. Bolt should fall in pretty seamlessly. Do it for this last boot here. Falls in, everything looks pretty centered. Now do note placement of the grease fitting. Your orientation of the end links are going to determine which side the end link is going to install on. Once it's bolted to the knuckle, you want to make sure your grease fitting is going to be pointing outward and accessible, not pointing inward. And when you do that, you want to make sure the thin side here, which is this side, is where the bolt is going to be going into, and the knuckle side is going to be on the thicker side. So that will determine your placement of how the end link will go. I'll show you guys once it's installed and how it should look, so we can take a final look at that. Sway bar install has not gone quite as planned. As you can see, I have part of my exhaust now sitting on the ground next to the car. I tried to get the rear sway bar in place around the exhaust and it just does not fit. Could not get it to fit. I started scuffing up the coating, this pretty thin powder coating, scratched up in a number of places, trying to get this thing slid into place. Maybe with the non-adjustable, which isn't quite as long here, I would think. I don't think it's quite as long. Maybe it will fit. I couldn't get this thing to fit, so pulled off the axle back portion of my boiler attack, which was a pain because I have some kind of a exhaust sealant stuff that dries in there, so it's like glue to prevent leaks. So yeah, it took a good 30 plus minutes to get this off. If you're doing the same install and you have the OEM lunchbox, I don't see how you can do this without taking that off. Just a heads up, I'll try to mention this at the beginning of the video before we get to this point, but I don't know, unless maybe if you're on a lift and you can fully swing the car, your sway bar around. Yeah, so maybe to start this whole install, before you even pull the OEM sway bar off, maybe pull off the exhaust and maybe save yourself a headache. So now I have the sway bar back up on my workbench after my failed attempt installing it. And I'm gonna go ahead and go back to the install instructions and install the bushings and the mounts onto the sway bar, because at this point now, I'm gonna need this in place so I can lift the sway bar up, both of them in place now that I don't have the exhaust in the way. And you can kind of see here in the instructions, it looks like the bushing mount is going to be right here. So it's going to be kind of butted up like so. And it looks like, yeah, so I'm just going to grease this up, put some grease around the inside of here. I have the sway bar mount bushings greased up. I actually only did grease the inner portion of the bushing. I didn't grease the portion between the mount and the bushing because it does not mention that. So I went ahead and only did the inside portion of the bushing. As you can see here, it's on the outer portion of this kind of a welded in washer section of the sway bar. And we have here, and you can notice all the scuffing and scratching it pretty much did to the sway bar trying to install it without removing the exhaust. So none of it looks like it's down to the metal, so it shouldn't cause any rusting issues, but definitely not happy about all that. Anyways, we're gonna get this underneath the car, try to get this pushed into place. I'm gonna finger tight the bolts from the OEM sway bar bushing mounts, and then I can let this kind of freely hang a little bit, and then we get the end links situated. I believe I have the sway bar in properly with the arms above the tow rods. I have them resting on the microfibers. Here are the mounts. I did not torque them down. They're tight, finger tight, maybe a little more than finger tight, but they're not like snugged up or anything like that. And it runs all the way to here. Post bolt with the post at the top was up here. Kind of tricky to get that one with this stupid connector in the way. And I'm gonna have to take a look here, as you can see, but the sway bar freely spins. So this is not like the OEM bar, which the mount and bushing is, I guess, adhered to the bar. This one freely spins. So the OEM one, I guess, does add a little bit of preload. With this one, we're not doing a preload. We'll just spin this up to attach to the end links at their correct position. Then we should be good to go. End link is on my workbench here. I actually went and installed one of them on the passenger side, just finger tight for everything. Realized I do need to cut off part of this boot. It wouldn't tuck in like I was hoping. It kept popping back out once this was fully inserted and we had a bolt, trying to put a bolt through. So, as you can see here, you leave this one here because that's going to be taken up by this, which will then give us that clearance here. It'll kind of just wrap around here, so it's not a big deal. This side, because we're having the bolt come through here, it'll actually interfere and kind of crumple up. So it's got a X-Acto blade here, and I'll just recommend trimming that off if you do use the boot. Then we go ahead and when you do install this, make sure your grease fitting is pointing, I believe it's be sitting on the car like so, and you want this to be pointing outward or to the back. And then we can get a grease gun on that without it interfering with anything. And so it'll sit kind of like this on the car, with the sway bar will be on the inward side, and this will be on the outward side of the sway bar. I am using the middle stiffness setting on the rear bar as indicated. So I'll go ahead and we'll trim this real quick, and then we'll get the end link onto the car. Our nicely trimmed end link here, and it's going to sit on the car like so. It's going to bolt at the bottom with the 17mm bolt provided by BMR to that knuckle position, and it's going to be on the outside of the sway bar. So I'm going to go ahead and put the lower bolt in place, and then we can go ahead and we can button up the upper portion to the sway bar middle position. With the lower bolt of your end link, you're going to make sure you have the washer on the bolt head side. We're going to pass it through like so, and you're going to actually have a washer on the inside, so you'll have your bushing completely captured by these metal washers. And then we're going to feed it up around and inside of the tow rod, and then we can screw in the bolt. As you can see, the grease fitting is easily accessible. If we had it flipped on the wrong side of the car, this fitting will be buckled up against the knuckle here, and good luck getting that thing greased up. And you can see here, end link can rotate into place, and I already have it mostly bolted up finger tight on the passenger side, so it should mostly line up with my second setting here on the sway bar. And so we can go ahead and get this bolted in. But real quick before I do that, I'll show you what you need to do to position the pieces you need for your end link. We're gonna have to feed this sleeve in around my bushing rubber boot here, and then that should slide in. And then with that in place, you're gonna hopefully just try not to scuff up your sway bar, and that should then line up with your setting that you want to go with. And then you have your Allen key bolt here, hex key bolt, that's going to feed in through the front portion or the outside portion of the end link, and should go through like so. And then you want to get your washer, slot that on here, and then your nut. Washer, of course I misplaced it initially, but it's been found. And your nut, I believe this is a 14mm nut. And so keep in mind, washer between the nut and the sway bar, no washer between end link and the sway bar. Feels like that would be a washer there, but I guess whatever reason it's not. Yeah, you're going to use your 14mm wrench and your 5/16 hex key. You lock that in place like so, and we can tighten her up. But don't go too tight, just finger tight for now. Don't forget blue Loctite only on your bottom end link bolt. 33 foot-pound on the 17mm bottom bolts, so I'm going to do that. 33 foot-pound bottom bolts for end linked with the Loctite. And yeah, that I don't see it mentioning anything for the upper, but I did notice in the sway bar documents that it says 35 foot-pounds for the upper nut. I went ahead and did torque the sway bar first, because to torque the end links, I'm going to need to actually apply a load to the suspension. I'm going to have to actually lift up this portion, and then I can go ahead and torque everything, and then I can do that on the other side. I'm going to be using a floor jack for that. I'm going to lift this up till it just starts coming off my quick jack. Suspension is under load. I have it lifted just off my quick jack block back here. So this should be simulated if the car is on the ground, about as accurate as you can get without actually being on the ground. And still having issue clearance with that bottom end link bolt. There's no way to get my torque wrench on there. You might need some kind of special, one of those super low profile torque wrench or something. So I'm just going to hulk it to what feels like 35 foot-pounds with a 17 millimeter on there. So 35, or actually 33 foot-pounds on the bottom, 35 foot-pounds on this one. I can get a torque wrench on this one, so there should be no problem torquing this up. I'll go ahead and torque this up, and then I'll do the other side after I load the other side up, and then I'll drop this back down, and then we can grease the fittings, and we should be good to go. Yeah, I'm not going to show all that because, you know, it's pretty self-explanatory, just like installing it. You're just going to now just torque it. So once again, 35 foot-pounds on the top, 33 foot-pounds with blue Loctite on the bottom, 35 foot-pounds on the 10 millimeter swaybar bushing mounts, which I've already done. Then we can grease everything up. One grease fitting per swaybar bushing mount, and then one on each end link. Be sure to grease your bushings with some super lube grease. My Hercules grease gun right here, I went ahead and already greased the 4 fittings. So don't forget any of your fittings. There is one on each end link, and then there is one on each swaybar mount. Here is how it looks. Everything installed. Very pretty, very nice. There's the bushing mount. Everything went together pretty smoothly. Worst part, of course, was having to remove the exhaust. So that doubled the time of this install, unfortunately. But yeah, anyways, let's go ahead and get this wrapped up. Install didn't go quite as planned. I had to do about twice as much work as I anticipated. As I showed you guys, I had to remove the exhaust. That was a pain. Don't forget the blue Loctite on the lower 17 millimeter end link bolts. And also for those bolts, I couldn't get a torque wrench on that. I couldn't get that torque to spec. So if you can figure that out, awesome. Let me know what you used. But overall, install went pretty good. Swaybar looks great. I have one more part to install, well, set of parts, which will be my next video, which is the front swaybar and front end links. I did go with the middle stiffness setting on the rear swaybar. If you have the non-adjustable, of course, you'll just have the one setting. I think it's about 150% more stiff than the OEM bar. But so once I get everything done, get the alignment, get it on the road, I'll report back on a final video telling you my thoughts of everything. Overall, pleased with the look. Hopefully I'm pleased with the performance. Sorry I'm out of breath. I've been rolling around in the garage and it's actually feeling pretty hot and humid. But yeah, if you like the hat, I have this on my store, zilla.com/shop, as well as my Etsy store, which is, link should be up here. And go ahead and check those out. Also, the shirt I wore earlier, the Derpzilla shirt, should be on the store as well. And yeah, check out all the other merch I have, Camaro related, muscle car related, humor, fun stuff, channel related. And let me know, guys, what you think. Any comments, whatnot, in the comment section. Feel free to subscribe to the channel and let me know what you think. I'm always open to hear all your comments. Check me out on Instagram, all the other places. Catch you guys on the next video if I don't pass out. Anyways, have a good one. Peace.